Hey, my friends, tonight we sail into something a little sticky, a little tipsy, and thoroughly tangled in myth, because tonight we journey aboard a ship that somehow grows grapes. Not in barrels, mind you, not dried, pressed, and shipped. No, this ship is the Vineyard. Vines drape across the mast like sails. Grapes nestle between oars. The deck creaks under the soft weight of leaves, curling into strange runes. And leaning back against the railing, holding a goblet that never seems to empty, is Dionysus himself, barefoot, grinning, and probably a little buzzed. The moonlight doesn't so much shine here as it ferments golden and slow and slightly mischievous. The sea laps against the hull like it's keeping time with a half-forgotten song. And you, dear traveler, are not entirely sure how you ended up here. You just know this boat smells like crushed grape-sweet wood smoke, and the kind of mischief that's legal only in mythology. Now listen, you probably wouldn't survive this kind of journey. Realistically, a floating vineyard is a maritime health code violation. There's no plumbing. Satyrs are bad at steering. And there's a non-zero chance that the grapes are mildly sentient. But lucky for you, you're just here to drift, to listen, to ease into sleep with a story steeped in old gods and older wines. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling generous, drop your location and the time where you are in the comments. I love knowing who's falling asleep, where. Now let's dim the lights, let the soft hum of a fan fill the quiet, and gently step into tonight's story. Just you and me. You feel the boat rock under you, not roughly, but like it's breathing. The sky is velvet dark, the stars uncorked above you. Dionysus watches you with half-lidded eyes, the sort that suggest he's either ancient or deeply sleepy. Probably both. You follow him as he leads you toward the bow, and that's when you notice vines. Actual grapevines growing along the polished planks, twisting around the railings as if the ship itself had taken root in myth. You reach out to touch a leaf and it shivers slightly like it recognizes you. Somewhere below deck there's a splash, maybe a barrel settling, maybe a dolphin somersaulting in the brine. Dionysus hums a tune without words. The boat doesn't have a sail, and yet it moves. It doesn't have a crew, and yet it glides with the confidence of a vessel that knows exactly where it's going, and more importantly, why. But to understand how we got here, Dionysus says you must start with the beginning. Not the wine, no, that came later. Not the ship, that's just decoration. But with him, a boy, a child, not entirely mortal, not entirely God. You close your eyes and listen as the waves hush and the deck becomes softer underfoot, until suddenly you're not on the ship anymore. You're in a cave, wrapped in ivy, somewhere deep in the hills of ancient Thebes. There a woman named Semele clutches her belly and whispers to the stars. She's pregnant with the child of Zeus, and that, historically speaking, never ends well. And indeed, it doesn't. Hera, wife of Zeus and queen of grudges, tricks Semele into asking to see Zeus in his true divine form. She does. She burns. Instant goddess barbecue. The child survives, barely saved at the last second by Zeus himself, who sews the still-growing fetus into his thigh. Yes, his thigh. Don't think too hard about the logistics. And so Dionysus is born twice, once of woman, once of God. And from the beginning, the Olympians look at him sideways. Too strange, too in-between, too mortal, and too divine. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a foreign god imported from Thrace or Phrygia, or whether he was always part of the Greek pantheon and simply misunderstood. You're back on the ship now. Dionysus chuckles softly, offering you a cup that refills no matter how slowly you sip. You try to ask where the grapes came from, why they grow here and not elsewhere, but he only winks. Ah, he says, that is a long story. The sea remembers, but only when she's drunk. You sit beside him. The stars spin lazily above. Somewhere behind you, a goat in a sailor hat is trying to learn the lute. You'll get used to that kind of thing soon enough. He tells you about his early wanderings, not as a god, but as a stranger, cast out from Olympus for being too joyful, too wild, too emotional. They wanted marble, he says, with a shrug, and I gave them music. He walks the earth in disguise, sometimes a beggar, sometimes a boy with ivy in his hair. He brings vines where he goes. Wine follows him like a shadow. Some people celebrate him, others curse him. Some try to lock him up. It never works. You can cage a lion, he says, but not a vine. It always finds a crack. And you begin to notice on the ship, the vines are growing a little faster. They curl softly around the mast. A new cluster of grapes appears beside your foot, plump and glowing. The ship smells deeper now, earthier, like damp soil after rain. You realize this ship doesn't just carry wine, it remembers every place Dionysus ever stepped, every vineyard he touched, every festival that ended in laughter and ash. Why a ship, you ask him? He smiles again. Because the land rejected me. But the sea never judges. And grapes, you know, are very forgiving. You look ahead, and in the distance the fog parts just enough to reveal another shore, but not one found on any map. The ship sighs as it turns toward it. The story is just beginning. You wake to the sound of waves slapping gently against the hull, but not like they're angry, more like they're applauding him, that strange barefoot god lounging near the prow, who sips from a clay cup with all the reverence of someone drinking the universe's very first joke. You blink slowly. The vines have crept even farther overnight, coiling around the ropes, trailing soft green tendrils across the oars. One of them waves at you, politely. Dionysus doesn't speak right away. Instead, he tosses a grape into the air and catches it in his mouth. Where were we? He asks, though you know he remembers exactly. Gods are like that, forgetful only when convenient. And so he begins again, not on the sea this time, but back on dry land, dusty and sun-washed. You're with him, standing barefoot in a field of wild-growing vines, so fresh they haven't learned how to grow in rows yet. They stretch across hills like lazy snakes, their grapes still tart, barely purple, unsure of their future purpose. This is where Dionysus discovers what happens when grapes are left too long in the sun, when they ferment in forgotten jars, when someone stumbles into a cup that smells like vinegar, but drinks anyway. And oh, the dizziness, the laughter, the visions, the sudden urge to dance with strangers and confess your deepest truths to a fig tree. You were probably there too, come to think of it. Historians still argue whether Dionysus invented wine or merely stumbled into it like a toddler finding a tambourine and deciding to start a religion. What's more, likely some say, is that early human societies already knew a little about fermentation, and Dionysus simply embodied their mystery, the divine excuse for what happened when joy outweighed reason. But Dionysus wasn't just peddling wine. No, he was spreading something far riskier release. Catharsis, the kind of emotional permission most mortals weren't used to having. In a world of rules and rigid rituals, here was a god saying, "Go ahead, Cry if you must laugh if you can, and howl at the moon if it feels right. He handed people more than wine. He handed them themselves. And it wasn't all fun and frolic. With the wine came something darker madness. Not the messy horror movie kind, but the creeping tilt of the world when too many truths come at once. When you see past the veil and realize the veil was you all along. Dionysus walked that line. His followers, maenads, satyrs, even mortals who should have known better, they all danced it too. Some came out radiant, others less so. You feel the ship rock beneath you again, a gentle nudge, as if it remembers those first dances in forgotten valleys where ivy bloomed overnight and strangers turned into friends and then into something stranger still. Ever hear a tiger whisper? Dionysus asks, suddenly his voice barely louder than the sea foam. You blink at him. He grins. They don't, of course. Not really. But in the right vineyard, under the right moon, you think they might. That's when you know the wine is working. He's talking, of course, about the part of his story where he travels east into Phrygia, into Lydia, into the mountains of India, if you believe the wilder scrolls. There, among beasts and burning incense, he rides in a chariot drawn by panthers and teaches kings the gentle art of letting go. There are no spreadsheets in Dionysus's world, no meetings. Only festivals that last 3 days, too long, and truths that come wrapped in riddles. One strange tale, half legend, half therapy session, claims he met a dying oak tree in Lydia and revived it with grape juice and a single kiss. Another scroll says he taught a village of mute children to sing again by letting them crush grapes with their bare feet under the stars. And one of them, he says softly, was me. That's the trick, you realize. Dionysus isn't just a god. He's often many at once. Joy and grief, comfort and danger. He's the drunk guest who breaks your chair and then fixes your heart. He's the host who forgets your name but remembers your soul. You walk with him now across the deck, stepping carefully over vines that have formed the shape of a sleeping lion. He'll move when we get near Sicily, Dionysus mutters. You're not sure if he means the lion or the vine, but you don't ask. Some answers would only make you thirstier. Below you the sea glimmers. In the distance a shape appears, maybe an island, maybe a mirage. The ship adjusts course without anyone steering. It remembers, Dionysus says again. The places, the people, the mistakes. You pause beside a wooden barrel carved with ancient symbols, grapes waves, and a face that might be your own. Dionysus watches you gently. You know he says, the first time someone laughed while crying, I was there. That was the beginning of wine, not the grape. That, the stars begin to tilt. The wind smells like time and something stranger, wild honey, maybe, or nostalgia. Dionysus hums again. This time you hear words buried in the melody. They are not in any language, you know, and yet you understand them. You're lying back now, head against a barrel that's far too comfortable to be legal, and Dionysus is still humming that impossible tune. The vines have begun to grow in time with the melody rising, curling, swaying, not just following the wind, but obeying something deeper, something ancient. The ship doesn't creak like a normal vessel. It groans like a treehouse that's half alive, half remembering a dream it once had about being free. You glance up and realize the stars are gone. Not vanished exactly, but blurred, smudged as though the night sky has been stirred with a spoon. Dionysus just shrugs, eyes twinkling. Sometimes the sea forgets where the sky ends. He clinks his goblet to yours, though you're not sure when you picked one up. The wine inside is the color of sunsets seen through closed eyelids. You want to know how it all changed, he says, tilting his head. The moment mortals realized I wasn't just some vine-loving hippie wandering around the Mediterranean. It was the pirates. Ah, yes, the pirates. You settle in as the story crests like a gentle wave. It began as all good sea tales do, with a bad idea. A ship of Tyrrhenian pirates, ambitious, reckless, probably sunburned, spotted a young man wandering the shore near Naxos, alone, cloaked in purple, barefoot, with curls that caught the light like polished amber. An easy ransom, they thought. Some spoiled prince, maybe a minor demigod on vacation. You can imagine it now, the pirates whispering, squinting through spyglasses, debating whether he's worth kidnapping. The captain, probably shirtless and overconfident, giving the nod. And poor Dionysus, pretending not to notice as the gang rushes him with ropes and declarations of temporary imprisonment. They drag him aboard. He says nothing, just smiles. Not the smile of someone afraid, not even amused. The smile of a being who knows exactly what kind of chaos lives in the bottom of a wine cup. The ship sets sail. The crew begins planning the ransom, debating whether to sell him to kings or gods or wealthy collectors of divine oddities. They don't notice the mast beginning to sprout leaves. They don't notice the deck turning softer. They notice when the grapevines start slithering up their ankles. One by one the ropes unravel, not to free Dionysus, but to rebind the crew. The sails curl into ivy. The oars pulse with green veins. The pirates panic, shouting and swinging at the plants. But the plants aren't fighting, they're laughing. The ship begins to creak, not with age, but with delight. Then the animals come. A leopard appears first, lounging where a barrel of salted fish used to be. Then a lynx. A lion, though some say it was a particularly muscular goat wearing a lion's mane. Either way, the crew stares. One man jumps overboard. He doesn't surface. The captain turns to Dionysus, trembling. "What are you?" he whispers. Dionysus leans forward and says, "I'm the end of your plans and the beginning of your story." And then, because of course, he turns them into dolphins. Yes, dolphins. Not statues, not dust. Dolphins. Playful, glistening, utterly confused dolphins. The kind that would leap through waves, then pause mid-air as if realizing they used to have knees. Historians still argue whether this story was symbolic. Dionysus says, smirking. But those dolphins still follow my ship sometimes. I think one of them has a tattoo. You lean over the edge. For a moment you swear you see one gray, grinning with a faint vine pattern along its back. It flips in the moonlight, then vanishes beneath the waves. The ship rocks again. You could swear the grapes are plumper now, almost smug. After that, Dionysus continues, people started listening. You cause one dolphin uprising, and suddenly you're a god worth watching. You smile, but behind the humor, there's a glint of truth. This wasn't just divine mischief. It was myth as a weapon, a warning, a reminder that joy when disrespected has teeth. The story becomes quieter now. The sea calms and you hear the soft rustle of vines in the wind, like thousands of tiny voices whispering lullabies. You feel something beneath your palm, a leaf, no, a petal, a flower that bloomed in your hand while the story was being told. Dionysus rises and walks the deck. The ship follows his footsteps like a loyal dog. You follow too, stepping carefully. The wood feels alive, as if the ship itself is grateful to be part of this tale. "I didn't choose the sea," he murmurs. "I just wasn't welcome anywhere else." That lands heavier than expected. You remember the stories how he wandered, rejected by Olympus, dismissed by kings, sometimes loved, more often feared. And yet he never stopped offering joy, never stopped planting vineyards in places no one thought grapes could grow. You sit with that, the loneliness in celebration, the longing behind the laughter. And just when the moment starts to tilt too sad, a splash erupts from the water, a dolphin backflipping, wearing quite unmistakably a tiny ivy wreath around one fin. You laugh. Dionysus winks, balance restored. You don't remember falling asleep, but when you open your eyes again, the ship has changed. Not drastically still wooden, still overrun by vines that hum quietly when no one's talking but subtly. The air feels heavier now, fragrant with overripe grapes and something older, darker. The kind of scent that lives in amphorae buried too long. Dionysus sits cross-legged on a crate, weaving tiny wreaths of ivy and purple blossoms, humming something that sounds like the wind trying to remember a song. He doesn't look at you when he says, "They exiled me, you know." Not with swords or fire, with silence. You sit beside him. The deck is warm beneath your legs, as if the sun from 100 harvests lives in the planks. Too joyful, he continues plucking a leaf and letting it twirl through his fingers. Too emotional, too alive. He sighs, then grins. Honestly, you'd think Olympus had a minimum frown requirement. And he's not entirely wrong. The Olympians, stoic sharp, sculpted into marble legends, never quite knew what to do with Dionysus. He didn't fit into their neat hierarchy of thunderbolts, war plans, and family drama so intense it'd make daytime TV blush. He was softness in a hard world, laughter in temples. He gave mortals something dangerous, a glimpse of divinity that felt accessible. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was ever truly accepted by the 12. Some say he earned his seat on Olympus only after conquering foreign lands. Others claim he was never officially welcomed, merely tolerated, like a loud uncle who keeps showing up at weddings with uninvited leopards. But back on Earth, Dionysus was walking, always walking. You picture it now, dusty sandals, a walking stick wrapped in ivy, a cloak that changed color depending on his mood. He wandered across cities and villages, preaching nothing, offering everything. And people noticed. Some threw him feasts, others threw rocks. Many just stared, unsure if they were witnessing a god or a very persuasive vineyard mascot. You follow him now through one of those towns, stone paths, sun-bleached walls, villagers peeking through curtains. Dionysus smiles at them all, dropping grape seeds in the cracks between stones. "They'll grow," he whispers, "if you're patient. Or very lucky." In one village, a child offers him a cup of water. Dionysus drinks, then taps the rim. The water fizzes, turns amber. "Careful," he says. With a wink, it bites. In another, a priest tries to exorcise him with incense and stern glances. Dionysus simply kisses his forehead and walks on. The priest forgets why he was mad. And then, of course, there were the Maenads. The Maenads. You see them in the distance now, dancing in the foothills like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. Women of the wild followers of Dionysus, draped in animal skins and adorned in vines. Their eyes shine with the kind of joy that scares kings. They don't ask permission. They don't follow rules. They sing the forest awake. You ask Dionysus if they were dangerous. He shrugs. Only to those who forgot how to feel. Some say the Maenads could tear a man apart in ecstasy or madness. Others say they were misunderstood rebels, mystics, midwives of divine chaos. One fringe account even claims they could hear the heartbeat of the earth itself and danced to keep it steady. That's probably metaphor. Probably. But not everything went smoothly. Dionysus, wherever he went, disrupted, shattered, rebuilt. You pass through a town where he's been before. The vineyards are thriving, but the temple is cracked. The townspeople seem changed, some blissfully happy, some quiet as if they've seen too much joy and can't quite return to normal. Joy can be heavy, Dionysus says softly. Even laughter leaves a bruise if you don't brace for it. You nod. You know what he means. Back aboard the ship, the wind has picked up. The sails, woven entirely of vines, now flutter like leaves in a storm. You spot a satyr at the helm, snoring gently into a bowl of fermented something. A cluster of grapes has grown from one of his horns. No one seems alarmed. Dionysus stretches cat-like. You know he says, "I didn't mind the exile." Not really. Olympus was cold. The world was warm, messy, beautiful. Better to wander and be misunderstood than to sit in a throne and feel nothing. You believe him. You feel it in the way the ship moves, not like it's heading somewhere specific, but like it's chasing a feeling, a memory, a mood. Besides, he adds, tossing a grape into the sea, "I found better company out here." He means you, maybe, or maybe the dolphins. Hard to tell. But as the stars return to the sky, no longer smudged, but crisp and clear, you begin to understand. This voyage isn't about reaching anything. It's about remembering, about letting go of the rules long enough to feel the water beneath you, the breeze in your hair, the soft pulse of vines that trust you enough to grow. And somewhere in the distance the Maenads are still dancing. They always are. The next time you blink, the world around you tastes faintly of salt on roasted figs, and the ship feels restless, not in a stormy way. No, this is a curious kind of movement, like a dog tugging gently at the leash, eager to sniff something ahead. You glance at Dionysus, who has taken to lounging upside down on a crate, legs dangling in the air like ivy vines too lazy to cling. He's tossing grapes at a satyr's open mouth. The satyr is snoring. Miraculously, he still catches everyone. You ever met a pirate? Dionysus asks casually, as if asking whether you've ever tried mulberries dipped in honey and regret. You nod vaguely, though, in truth, you're not sure whether last night's dream was about pirates or just men with dramatic hats and unresolved father issues. He grins. Good, because we're about to meet the worst of them. He means, of course, the infamous band of Tyrrhenian pirates. Not the ones who turned into dolphins, different lot entirely, though apparently poor at reading divine warning signs. This group, he explains, wasn't after a ransom. They were after wine. Specifically, the kind rumored to bubble in barrels, even before being opened, the kind that made your enemies forgive you and your friends kiss you unexpectedly. The kind only a god could brew. You feel the ship adjust its course. Ahead in the mist, another vessel emerges, long lean, with sails like tattered wings, and a crew that looks like they chew glass for breakfast. The ships draw close. The pirates wave. Dionysus waves back. You notice he's wearing a hat now. It has feathers. No explanation is given. The pirates invite him aboard, offer him olives, flatter his hair. They laugh too loudly and eye the satyrs with the kind of greed that usually ends with curses. They want wine, yes, but more than that, they want control of the source. A floating vineyard, a sailing seller, unthinkable profit. Dionysus offers them a single barrel. They insist on more. So he gives them what they want. The vines slither across the sea, boarding the pirate ship as if it were soil. They twist around the mast, the railings, even the anchor. The grapes grow too fast, bursting into fat clusters that hang like pendulums from the rigging. The pirates laugh and cheer. They drink deeply, too deeply. That's when the hallucinations start. One claims the grapes are whispering secrets about his grandmother. Another begins to believe he's actually inside the wine, swimming through memories that never happened. A third tries to stab a satyr, but accidentally proposes marriage instead. The ship lists sideways, heavy with intoxicated ambition. And Dionysus, he's conducting, not with a baton, but with a vine that sways gently from his hand. The grapes dance to his rhythm. The pirates collapse, giggling, weeping, occasionally barking like geese. The sea itself seems giddy. Historians still argue whether this story is a metaphor Dionysus murmurs to you watching the chaos with mild amusement, or a warning. You want to ask a warning against what? But he's already moved on, stepping lightly back onto his own ship as the pirate's vessel drifts away, overgrown, blooming a floating jungle of wine dreams and botched criminal careers. They'll be fine, he says with a shrug. Eventually, probably. The satyrs cheer. One of them somersaults into a vat and emerges wearing a crown of fermented grapes. A dolphin surfaces and spits out a cork. Everyone applauds. Back on your ship, the mood shifts. Not sober. Dionysus would never allow that, but more thoughtful. The vines seem calmer now, less eager to sprawl. You realize this wasn't just a prank. It was a declaration: you can't steal joy. You have to grow it, tend it, let it choose you. Dionysus sits beside you, arms resting on his knees. They never learn, he says quietly. They try to bottle the divine, put it on shelves, sell it at marked up prices. But joy doesn't work that way. He hands you a grape. It's warm and slightly glowing. Here's the thing, he continues almost in a whisper. The vineyard doesn't grow just anywhere. Not on temples, not on thrones. It needs movement, change, risk. That's why I planted it here. You look around. The ship sighs beneath your feet. It makes sense now. This isn't just a boat with a vineyard. It's a vineyard because it's a boat. Because it moves. Because it drifts through chaos, through stories, through longing. You ask him if that's why he made it. He leans back, stretches like a cat, and grins. No, I just thought it would look cool. And yet you know better. The ship rocks gently as night thickens. The sea glows faintly with reflections that aren't quite stars. A setter plays a slow tune on a pipe. Vines sway like dancers who finally found the beat. And somewhere out in the distance, the pirate ship blooms on a reminder that you can chase wine-steel barrels, plunder vineyards. But unless you understand it, unless you listen to it, you'll never truly taste it. You fall asleep to the sound of leaves breathing. You wake to birdsong. Not seagulls. These are melodic, dreamlike notes that flutter across the deck like feathers on a breeze. You sit up, still sticky, with the scent of crushed grapes and salt, and realize you're the only one awake. The satyrs are curled in grape barrels like drunk raccoons. One is using a cheese wheel as a pillow. Dionysus is draped over the prow like a sleepy cat god, snoring gently into the mist. And the ship it's blooming, not just vines this time. Full rows of grape-laden trellises have somehow unfurled along the sides, running neatly from bow to stern. Overhead, the mast has sprouted blossoms, soft golden ones with petals like parchment, warm to the touch. It's not a ship anymore, it's a floating vineyard. And you have no idea how it's still afloat. You rise barefoot, stepping carefully. The wood beneath your feet feels like damp earth, now the kind found under an olive tree in late September. The vines part slightly as you move, like they recognize you, as though you're part of this story now. Dionysus stirs and yawns. Ah, the first harvest, he says, voice half muffled. It always arrives unexpectedly. You ask him what he means. He gestures to the vines which are now sprouting tiny crystal-like droplets from the grape's dew or perhaps early morning wine. He picks one grape, crushes it in his hand, and lets the juice run down his wrist. Fresh, chaotic, slightly prophetic. He offers you one. You hesitate. Don't worry, he adds. Only mildly transformative. You eat it. The taste is unlike anything you've known. Sunlight, thunder sorrow, your grandmother's laugh, the moment just before a kiss. You blink. The deck seems brighter. Or maybe your heart just slowed enough to see clearly. This, he says, was when I realized ships make better vineyards than mountains. You glance at him. That makes absolutely no sense. He grins. Exactly. You sit together at the edge of the deck, legs dangling over the sea. The horizon rolls out ahead of you like silk. And Dionysus tells you how the idea came to him not in a dream, not in a temple, but during a storm. Long ago, he explains, he was sailing alone, fleeing something. Maybe gods, maybe grief. The stories differ. The waves were tall enough to kiss the moon. His barrels had smashed. The vines he'd carried carefully tucked into his cloak were nearly lost. And then he says the ship split. And something strange happened. The sea didn't swallow him. It cradled him. The wood groaned, the vines grabbed hold, and instead of sinking, the vessel grew. The ship's ribs sprouted tendrils. Its mast stretched skyward like a stalk in spring. The storm didn't stop, but it seemed to pause just long enough to let the impossible take root. And when the wind calmed, he was no longer alone on a ship. He was aboard a vineyard that moved. You can't plant joy in one place, he explains. It needs to drift, to stumble, to get lost and find itself again. Historians still argue whether the tale of the ship vineyard was an allegory. Some say it symbolizes the spread of viticulture across the Aegean. Others insist it represents Dionysus' own emotional transformation from wandering exile to divine celebrant of chaos. A few particularly salty archaeologists have even tried to tie it to Phoenician wine transport methods. But let's be honest, none of them mention the singing vines. Because yes, the vines sing now. It starts as a hum, low and earthy, like the sound your grandmother made when stirring soup. Then it rises, soft harmonies drifting through the leaves. You close your eyes. The ship isn't just sailing anymore, it's breathing, growing, remembering every foot that danced across it, every bottle uncorked, every story told. Dionysus begins to hum along. His voice doesn't lead the song, it joins it. Subtle, rooted, as if he too was planted here. Below deck you hear footsteps. The satyrs are staring. One begins to play a reed pipe. Another stretches and starts stomping grapes in a barrel with one hoof, humming tunelessly but enthusiastically. The fermentation begins before breakfast. You glance around and realize the ship has no anchor, no rudder, no wheel. Who's steering this thing, you ask? Dionysus raises an eyebrow. Steering. You try again. Where are we going? We're already there, he says simply. And somehow you believe him. You rise, brush grape skins off your robe, and begin helping the vines. Some need trimming, others need gentle untangling. They respond to your touch, not with magic, but with trust, as if they know you're not trying to control them, just help them grow. By midday the ship is bursting with scent, not just wine, but bread, honey, the faintest trace of rosemary. Someone has started baking. You're not sure who, possibly the dolphin again. Dionysus takes your hand, guides you to the center of the deck. You expect a sermon, a lesson, a riddle. Instead he dances, just a few steps. No fanfare, just bare feet and crooked rhythm and the grin of someone who survived exile storms and far too many philosophers trying to define him. You dance too, and the ship follows. It tilts, leans, sways, not dangerously, but like it understands the beat. The vines sway, the satyrs clap, the grapes shimmer in the sun, and you begin to understand. A vineyard on a ship isn't absurd, it's necessary, because joy doesn't belong in rows, it belongs in motion. The air this evening is thicker, richer somehow, as if it has steeped in sun and laughter all day, and now needs to cool like wine settling in a cask. You sit cross-legged near the mast, watching vines pulse ever so slightly with the last light of the sun. They're not just growing anymore, they're thriving. Plump grapes hang like little planets glowing faintly, and you swear some of them have started to hum again. A few are vibrating ever so gently in harmony with the ship's creaking. Dionysus is barefoot on the rigging, walking it like a tightrope, with a goblet in one hand and his scroll in the other. He's pretending to read, but it's upside down. He knows you're watching. I used to walk alone, he calls down, just me and the ivy, before I figured out that a ship made the perfect soil. You laugh. He shrugs. What it moves, it's dramatic, and there's always an exit. You ask him again why a vineyard on a ship. He hops down beside you, robes fluttering. You've never had a festival at sea, have you? You shake your head. He grins. Then tonight is your first. With a clap of his hands, the ship begins to change. It doesn't creak, it unfolds. Like a flower blooming in reverse. The barrels roll to the edges. A long table rises up through the middle of the deck, smooth and polished, already covered in fig leaves and small clay plates. The vines retract, slightly, curling neatly into patterns like they've been rehearsing. The satyrs emerge, first wearing what can only be described as partial formal wear. Tattered togas, laurel wreaths slightly askew. One has grapes braided into his beard. They carry platters of dates, olives, roasted chestnuts, and bread still steaming from an oven you didn't know existed on board. The dolphins leap in synchronized arcs beside the ship, chirping like they're part of the entertainment, and the music, not performed so much as born. The pipes begin thin and wavering, then joined by soft tambourines and the occasional joyful scream from a satyr who stepped in a particularly spicy mustard. You sit at the table. Dionysus pours you wine, red velvety and somehow fizzy at the edges. This, he says, was the first floating festival. You take a sip. The world goes warm at the edges. It begins slowly, one satyr doing a shoulder shimmy, another tapping on the deck. Then laughter, then clapping. Then the kind of dance that doesn't ask for permission. And Dionysus, ever the host, is in the middle of it all, laughing, spinning, pouring wine, pretending not to notice when the ship dips slightly from too much grape stomping on one side. You're swept into it, not dragged, not pushed, swept, like sea foam caught on a breeze. You dance with a satyr named Thybos, who swears he invented wine, but lost the paperwork. You get into a philosophical debate with a dolphin about the ethics of fermentation. You lose. The dolphin is very persuasive. As the night deepens, Dionysus climbs onto the table and begins to tell stories. Not sermons, not monologues. Stories, half true, half dreamed. One time he says, holding a fig in one hand and a vine in the other, I planted a single grape seed on the back of a turtle, just to see what would happen. The vine grew. It wrapped around its shell. The turtle got so drunk, it forgot how to swim. Everyone laughs. Even the grapes seem to chuckle, releasing a sweet, syrupy scent into the air. He tells another about a king who tried to outlaw joy, said it made people inefficient. Dionysus poured wine into the city's wells. For 3 days no one worked, but they wept together. That king ended up making grape stomping a national holiday. You look around and realize this is not chaos, it's communion. No altars, no priests, just mouths full of laughter, hearts wide open and vines that pulse like veins across the deck. This is what Dionysus always wanted, not worship. Participation. Historians still debate whether my festivals were sacred or scandalous. Dionysus says, refilling your cup. I say, why not both? And here's the strangest part, you believe him. This ship isn't a vineyard. It's a memory. A moving, breathing, tipsy scrapbook of human joy. And the vines, they remember everything, every laugh, every stumble, every tear wiped with a fig leaf. You lean back. The stars above seem closer now, pulsing with the rhythm of the ship's slow glide. Dionysus leans in. Joy is a ritual, he whispers, but you have to let it surprise you. And as the music continues and the vines begin to bloom again under moonlight, and a satyr hands you a piece of candied ginger while pirouetting for no reason, you believe that too. By morning, the festival has melted into dreams. The ship drifts quietly now, like it too is nursing a gentle wine sleep. The long table has vanished, swept clean by vines that seem to know when the party's over. A few satyrs lie tangled in garlands, snoring into olive pits. A grape floats by in a bowl of honey. No one's in a hurry to reclaim it. You sit near the stern feet, dangling just above the water, watching the sea move beneath you like silk pulled through fingers. Dionysus approaches barefoot as ever hair tousled by salt wind and sleep. First time's always a little loud, he says, sitting beside you. The second festival is quieter. Stranger, you tilt your head. There's another one. There's always another one, he says with a wink. But not now. Not yet. Now there's something else. You hear it before you see it, pipes again but slower this time. Deeper. Like the ocean humming to itself. You turn. Behind the ship the horizon is breaking not with dawn, but with color. Streaks of purple, gold, and green ripple across the sky. The water stirs. Something's coming, and then you see them. Not ships, not exactly. More like floating altars, platforms of wood and woven reeds drifting toward you with purpose. Atop them, musicians, dancers, people in robes of saffron and indigo. They're singing in a language you don't know, but understand anyway. Their faces are painted with grape juice and ash. They heard Dionysus says softly, mortals always here. You realize then that this was never a private voyage. The floating vineyard was always meant to be seen, to be joined. And now the world is answering back. The floating festival grows. Other ships approach, small ones, big ones, one that appears to be a giant wine cask with oars. People climb aboard. Some are priests, others are bakers. A few look like they got lost on their way to a wedding and decided to stay for the grapes. They bring gifts, cheeses wrapped in fig leaves, amphorae of strange local wines, honey-soaked cakes shaped like lions and stars. One man offers Dionysus a flute carved from the bone of a fish that doesn't exist anymore. Dionysus accepts with a grin and starts playing a tune so lively a nearby dolphin flips in time. You walk the deck, watching as it shifts again, widening, stretching to welcome the newcomers. The vines don't seem surprised. They open gently to make room. They always make room. In the center of the ship, Dionysus declares a contest not of strength or wisdom, but of stories. Tell me, he says, what's the most ridiculous thing you've done for joy? One by one they answer. A sailor once filled his boots with wine to sneak it into a monastery. A shepherdess taught her flock to dance in a spiral just to impress a rival. A child once tried to ferment peaches using only moonlight and willpower. Dionysus applauds them all. You begin to understand the truth. Joy is not passive. It's effortful, intentional, sometimes absurd, but always worth the trouble. Historians still argue whether these floating festivals were real, Dionysus says, as the crowd roars with laughter. They debate logistics, cargo limits, vine density. They want rules. He waves a hand. But the vines don't care, and neither do you. The music shifts again, no longer festive but haunting. A deep rhythm begins and slowly the dancers begin a spiral. You step into it. The steps are simple, familiar. You've never learned them, but your feet remember. Round and round, breath and heartbeat, wine and salt, laughter and tears. The ship doesn't spin, but the world does. And when you stop, the sun is low. The water glows orange and silver. The other vessels drift, nearby forming a slow-moving constellation of floating vineyards and drifting joy. Dionysus clinks his goblet against yours. You're starting to understand, he says. You nod. You do. This isn't just a ship. It's a seed. And it has planted itself across the sea in hearts, in stories, in old songs that return when the moon is high and the vines are ripe. You close your eyes and listen to the gentle rustle of leaves. By now your legs sway with the rhythm of the ship even when you stand still. The vines have grown gentler in their reach, almost polite. They brush past your ankles like affectionate cats content for the moment, no longer trying to claim every barrel and oar. A peace has settled over the vineyard, something slow, tender, and perhaps tentative. You notice it in Dionysus too. He's quieter today, less the ringleader of chaos and more a curator of silence. He leans on the rail, eyes fixed on the horizon, sipping from a cup that refills only when he's not looking. You stand beside him. They've heard, he murmurs. The other gods, you ask. He nods slowly, and not all of them are thrilled. The wind picks up, the sea feels colder, and there it is, that familiar divine friction. Olympus never liked when mortals started enjoying themselves without permission, especially not in ways that bypassed temples' taxes or carefully sanctioned prayers. You feel it in the air, sharp and metallic, like a storm that hasn't decided where to land. Dionysus smiles faintly. They don't mind the wine. What they mind is the joy. He turns towards you, eyes glowing with something you can't name. You see, joy is slippery. You can't tithe it, can't weigh it on a scale. And when mortals find it on their own... He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. The ship creaks. The vines pull tighter. The dolphins begin swimming in slow defensive circles around the hull. Then light, not sunshine. This is colder. A sterile shimmer that slices across the sea like a blade. You look up. Hovering in the sky is a chariot of flame. Apollo. He descends with all the restraint of a god who believes himself above everyone, even gravity. golden radiant and annoyed. He lands on the deck with no regard for grapevines or sleeping satyrs who groan and roll over. Well, he says, dusting his shoulder, this looks unsanitary. Dionysus bows mockingly. Apollo, welcome. Care for a fermented fig? Apollo grimaces like he's just licked vinegar. No, I'm here because word of your floating orchard has reached Olympus. Oh, good, Dionysus replies, plopping into a pile of cushions. I was worried you were missing out. You're upsetting the order of things. Order, Dionysus gestures vaguely at the dancing vines. This is order, just a different rhythm. Apollo paces. There are rules. Wine belongs in temples. Joy is earned through suffering discipline. An occasional lyre recitals, Dionysus interrupts. The temperature dips slightly. The dolphins stop circling. You step back. The vines shift around your ankles, protective now. Dionysus doesn't flinch. Why does it bother you so much, he asks. That people laugh without a hymn book. Apollo's eyes flash. Because you make them forget. They lose themselves. No, Dionysus says softly. They find themselves, just not the parts you like. For a moment everything is still. Then Apollo sighs, you always were impossible. He vanishes just like that. No thunder, no smoke, just a shimmer of gold and a judgmental breeze. The vines relax. The dolphins resume playing. A satyr wakes up, sneezes, and falls back asleep. You exhale. That went well, Dionysus says, stretching. You look at him. Is he going to come back? Probably, he shrugs. With more gods. Maybe a committee. You stare out at the horizon where the sky is beginning to darken again. You're not worried. He turns to you, smiling that smile that never quite lets you relax. Not really. I've got vines, I've got stories, and I've got you. He raises his goblet. Joy always finds a way, even when Olympus sulks. And deep down you believe him, because you've seen what joy can do, how it climbs, curls, clings, how it survives storms, pirates, and even divine disapproval. It's stubborn, it's patient, it's growing. Later that night, the sea feels oddly hushed, as if holding its breath. The vines are quiet too. Not still exactly, but restful, coiled into themselves like cats after a long day of climbing furniture and knocking over important philosophical assumptions. You sit near the bow with Dionysus, who's plucking petals from a grape blossom and dropping them into the sea. Each petal vanishes with a tiny hiss, like the water can't decide whether it's blessed or slightly annoyed. He says nothing for a while. You don't push. Silence is part of the story too. When he finally speaks, it's soft. They came in droves, you know, mortals. Not for worship, not for miracles, just for the wine. You tilt your head, and that bothered you. He snorts. Not at all. It bothered them. He gestures vaguely toward the sky. The ones with thrones, altars, statues. He leans back against a coiled rope. They wanted devotion. I offered delight, and that it seems made all the difference. You drift with him through memory, now stepping ashore in sleepy seaside towns. The ship doesn't dock it simply, nudges the land until it feels welcome. And always the people gather, not in reverence, but in curiosity. They come with cups, baskets, questions, and Dionysus pours freely. At first they sip cautiously, expecting rules, expecting sermons. When none arrive, they sip deeper, and soon music, dancing. Someone builds a lyre out of driftwood. A fisherman crafts a flute from a goose feather and a hollow crab claw. A child makes sandals out of grape skins. Everyone's laughing. You walk among them, helping refill cups, guiding the vines where they begin to tangle. One woman asks if you're a priest. You laugh. She does too. Joy doesn't need a priest, she says, and you nod. But not everyone rejoices. In one town the governor appears a man made entirely of starch, it seems, and demands to speak with Dionysus. You've disrupted trade, he barks. The baker hasn't baked, the smith won't forge. People are dancing at midday. Dionysus offers him a grape. The governor slaps it away. That, Dionysus says calmly, was your only mistake. The vines rise not to harm, but to confuse. They spiral around the man's boots, making him trip, then gently carry him to a nearby fountain where he's dunked exactly once before, being left to dry with a garland around his neck. He never quite recovers, but the town's joy returns. Historians still argue whether these events were literal, Dionysus tells you as the ship pulls away. Some say they were allegories for rebellion. Others think I was a metaphor for seasonal renewal. He shrugs. Maybe I was just thirsty. Back on the ship, more travelers arrive. Some by choice, others by accident. One day a boat full of merchants pulls alongside. They carry bolts of cloth, jars of olive oil, boxes of scrolls. They ask to trade. Dionysus considers, then offers 1 cup of wine for the entire cargo. They laugh. He doesn't. They accept. And as they sail away, drunk and smiling, the vines on their boat begin to sprout. No longer just passengers, they've become carriers. You realize what's happening. The vineyard isn't just growing on this ship. It's spreading. Each visitor who leaves takes a vine with them, a cup, a story. They plant it at home or on their own boat or in the memory of a friend's laughter. And joy, as it always does, multiplies. There's a wordless understanding among the satyrs now. They move with more purpose. They tend to the vines like midwives at a holy birth. They stomp grapes not just for drink, but for distribution. The barrels are labeled sort of. You're not sure what the symbols mean, but one definitely implies consume only if you're emotionally stable. And then one night Dionysus brings out a special amphora. It's old, cracked, covered in writing so ancient even the vines lean in to read it. This, he says, was from the first vineyard. Before ships, before gods. He opens it. The scent is indescribable. It smells like what you imagine the world tasted like before language. He pours 1 drop into the sea. A ripple spreads far and wide, beyond sight, beyond sound, and for a brief moment the stars pulse in unison. The dolphins leap higher than ever. A satyr bursts into tears over a fig, and somewhere on a distant shore a stranger wakes from sleep, smiling. The ship is slower today. Not sluggish, just deliberate, as if every plank and vine has agreed to pause, to breathe. The air is syrupy with warmth, the kind that makes you want to nap under a fig tree with a half-eaten pomegranate in your lap. You lie on your back beside a barrel, watching leaves flutter overhead like lazy butterflies. Dionysus is playing knucklebones with a satyr betting cups of invisible wine. You suspect they're both cheating. You also suspect neither of them cares. And then, without warning, you ask him the question that's been brewing since your first steps aboard. Why do the grapes only grow on wood? Dionysus stops mid-throw. The bones clatter to the deck. He blinks, and for the first time since you've met him, he looks caught off guard. Well, he says, slowly, no one's ever asked that. You sit up. He scratches his chin. You'd think it was the soil, wouldn't you? Or magic. Or divine botany. He stands, stretches, gestures broadly at the ship. But no, it's because of her. And just like that, the vines grow still. Even the satyrs fall quiet. You feel the ship subtly tilt, not in danger, but in reverence. She was a nymph. Dionysus begins voice, softer now. Wood-born, quiet, curious. liked to talk to snails. You imagine her small, graceful wearing bark like silk vines twining through her hair. She and I, he pauses. We planted the first vineyard together. He walks to the railing. You follow. They'd built it in a grove, he explains. A hidden one. Trees grew in perfect arches. The sunlight filtered in like a blessing. It was the kind of place that made you believe the world could still forgive itself. And the grapes. He smiles faintly. They grew like stars. Fat, sweet, full of secrets. But joy, he reminds you, never goes unnoticed. Another god, he won't say, which found the grove. Didn't understand it. Tried to tame it. Tried to claim her. She fled. Dionysus tried to follow. But by the time he reached her, she'd vanished. Merged back into the wood. Became a tree. Not to hide. To survive. Historians, he mutters, don't know her name. They never write down the quiet ones. He touches the railing. The vines there shiver. So I brought her with me. Not her body. Her home. He built the ship from her tree. That's why the grapes grow. Not because of sunlight. Not because of seawater. But because this ship remembers her. It carries her spirit in every beam, every knot in the grain. The vines, he explains, refuse to grow on stone. They won't take root in temples. They reject marble metal pride. But give them a surface made from kindness, from grief, from memory. They bloom. You sit with that, and the silence that follows is holy. The wind picks up just slightly. You swear it smells faintly of honey and moss. Dionysus doesn't speak again for a while. Neither do you. Later, when the ship resumes its slow drift, you notice something strange. A patch of new vines has grown overnight. Tighter, stronger, shaped like an embrace. You don't mention it. Neither does he. Instead, he hands you a cup. It's lighter than usual, fresher, almost playful. He smiles. From her side of the vineyard. You drink. It tastes like the feeling of being seen. By the next morning, the ship feels different again. There's a tension in the air, not fear exactly, but a kind of anticipation. The vines are restless, coiling tighter, their leaves twitching with unseen wind. Even the satyrs are subdued. One tries to start a dance and trips over his own tail. No one laughs. That's how you know it's serious. Dionysus stands at the edge of the deck, staring into the distance. His wine sits untouched. His robe, for once, is neatly wrapped. You move beside him, and he gives you a sideways glance. Storm's coming, he says. You look out at the sea. The horizon looks smooth, the clouds lazy, the water calm. He laughs softly. Not that kind. You blink, and then slowly you begin to feel it. The air buzzes beneath your skin. The ship creaks in warning. The grapes near your feet tighten into knots as if bracing themselves. From beneath the waves, something rumbles. Then a splash. Far off the port side, a long, sinuous shape breaches the surface, a sea serpent gleaming and green eyes like twin lanterns. It doesn't roar. It watches. Her name's not important, Dionysus says. Just don't call her slimy. She hates that. The serpent coils, rising taller than the mast, and then dips again. It's not attacking. Not yet. But she's circling. Testing. Waiting. What does she want, you ask? Dionysus shrugs. Maybe to test me. Maybe to taste the wine. Maybe both. The satyrs start panicking. One grabs a bucket and hurls it overboard. Another tries to climb the rigging and gets tangled in vines that clearly don't have the patience. Dionysus sighs and steps to the center of the ship. He raises a hand. Enough. The vines freeze, the ship stills, and the sea serpent rises again, closer now. Dionysus walks to the edge, picks a cluster of grapes from the railing and tosses it into the sea. The serpent catches it mid-air with surprising grace. Then another, and another. Slowly its posture changes from coiled menace to lazy arc like a cat finally fed. They always want something fermented, he says. You exhale, but too soon, because suddenly the skies darken. Not the serpent, not Apollo. This is different. A wall of clouds barrels toward you, from the west, too fast, too precise. The water churns. The ship groans. The festival air is gone, replaced by something sharp and electric. Here we go, Dionysus mutters, tying his hair back with a grapevine. You grab the railing as the first winds hit. The satyrs scatter. Barrels roll. A dolphin flies through the air, clearly not on purpose. The storm doesn't just hit, it arrives. Like a god with bad manners. Rain slaps the deck sideways. Waves lash the sides of the ship. The mast bends under the force. Dionysus stands still at the center vines, lashing around him like loyal dogs. Hold, he whispers. Not to the storm, to the ship. And the ship listens. It doesn't break. It shifts. Planks loosen and reattach. Vines lash themselves across the mast for reinforcement. Barrels anchor each other in a web of roots. The whole vessel reacts. You realize then the ship is alive. Not just magical, not just enchanted, alive. It was never just a vineyard on a boat. It was a creature, a memory made physical, a promise carved into wood and wine. And you are part of it now. Dionysus lifts his arms. The wind swirls around him. His voice is barely audible over the roar. We do not break, he says. We bend. We bloom. The storm howls in response, and then the vines rise. You've seen them grow before, but this is different. They surge skyward, like green lightning twisting into nets canopies' shields. One wraps around you warm and firm, holding you upright. The storm rages, but it cannot drown joy, not this kind. Eventually the winds soften. The rain slows. The clouds thin, and then silence. Not the stunned silence of fear, but the heavy golden silence of survival. You look around. The ship is still afloat. The vines are already repairing themselves. The satyrs emerge, blinking, soaked, dragging snacks from wherever they stashed them. Dionysus is smiling, not triumphantly, just knowingly. You okay, he asks you. You nod, heart still pounding. Good, he says, because that's how you know it's worth it. He leans on the rail, watching the sea serpent drift off into the mist, now purring like an enormous vine-covered dog. Joy doesn't mean storms don't come, he says. It just means you build something that survives them. The storm has passed, but the ship still creaks with the weight of what it endured. The wood is soaked and swollen. The vines droop, exhausted but intact. And you are bone-weary and deeply grateful for every plank that held every leaf that stayed. You sit with Dionysus near the bow, both of you wrapped in cloaks that smell of smoke and crushed time. The air is clearer now, the sea smoother, but silence lingers. It's the quiet after chaos. Not fearful, just thoughtful. The kind of quiet that sips slowly from a cup and doesn't rush to speak. A barrel rolls past. It's dented but not broken. You stop it with your foot. Dionysus nods approvingly. That one's been through worse, he says. Once fell off a cliff into a temple. Rolled out the front door a week later, full of honey and heresy. You smile. The absurdity is comforting. The satyrs begin to stir again, stretching, testing the deck, like they're unsure it'll stay beneath them. One begins repairing a torn bit of sail with what appears to be a fish net and a vine needle. Another uncorks a jug, sniffs it, and winces. He drinks anyway. Dionysus watches it all with a kind of fond detachment. Resilience, he says, is rarely elegant. You glance at him. Has it always been like this? The storms? The repairs? The serpents? He tilts his head as if considering whether to lie. Then shrugs. Always. Joy isn't the absence of trouble. It's the decision to throw a festival anyway. You let that settle. It makes more sense than anything else you've heard today. Below deck, you hear laughter. Someone's found the preserved figs. Someone else is playing a flute that seems to squeak with every third note. The ship is healing, not just in structure, but in spirit. And then a soft thud. You look over the rail. Floating beside the ship, half sunken, is a smaller vessel. A fishing boat from the looks of it. Tattered sail. Empty net. One oar, and one man clinging to the side. You rush to pull him aboard. He's soaked, shivering, mumbling in a language you don't quite understand, but somehow feel. The words are knotted with grief. Dionysus approaches slowly, gently. He kneels, places a hand on the man's chest. For a moment nothing happens. Then the vines stir. They stretch across the deck, creeping toward the man, but not to bind, to comfort. They curl around his limbs like a blanket. One offers a grape. Another drips wine into a small cup. The man drinks, and then he weeps. Not loud, not broken, just real. No one interrupts. The ship adjusts to give him space. A satyr plays a soft tune. Dionysus says nothing, because he knows this is the other side of joy, the part people forget, the part that cracks you open so something can grow. Not wine, not laughter, understanding. Historians still argue whether my rituals were therapeutic. Dionysus murmurs. They were. You help the man to his feet. He looks at you, eyes swollen but steady. You offer him bread. He nods, sits, eats. Just like that, he's part of the crew. You realize now this is how it spreads. Not in grand proclamations or lightning bolts, but in quiet gestures. A cup passed, a shoulder offered, a place set at the table without question. Later that night, the sky is full of stars again. The kind you forgot existed, the kind that look close enough to pluck. Dionysus lies on the deck, arms folded behind his head, gazing up at them like they're old friends. They don't dance much anymore, he says. You lie beside him. Who, you ask? The stars. Used to twirl around each other like tipsy lovers. Then someone named them, charted them, told them where to be. You both stare upward. I think they miss it, he whispers. You do too. So you close your eyes, and in your mind the stars begin to sway. You wake to the smell of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts. There's music again, but softer now, like a lullaby hummed into a cup of tea. You stretch, feeling the ache of days spent aboard a living vessel, and realize the vines have braided your blanket into something resembling a grape-patterned quilt. Thoughtful, if a little clingy, the ship is moving at a lazy pace. No destination, just motion. Dionysus sits near the helm, which no one actually uses, carving something into the wood with a sliver of bone. You approach, curious. He turns it toward you. It's a crude map, not of seas, not of cities, but of memories. Tiny symbols mark where laughter erupted during a storm. A spiral shows where the first satyr fell asleep mid-dance and was crowned with figs. There's even a little dolphin etched in the corner, labeled "argued with barrel." You're charting emotions, you murmur. He nods. Places fade. Feelings don't. You run a hand along the grain. The ship hums faintly beneath your fingers, like it agrees. He sets the carving down. Want to help with the packing? You blink. Packing. We're approaching land, he says simply. You rush to the side. Sure enough, on the horizon, a shoreline curls into view, small tree line bathed in late afternoon gold. Don't worry, Dionysus says, watching you. We're not staying, but they need something. He means them, the mortals. You feel it in the air. A town waits beyond that shore. Quiet, tired, thirsty not just for drink, but for something deeper. Joy, laughter, permission. The satyrs begin to stir with purpose. They load barrels, arrange woven baskets of grapes, stack odd clay jugs shaped like animals mid-dance. You help careful not to crush a satyr's tail underfoot. One offers you a flask labeled in vine script you can't read. For mending, he says with a wink. As you prepare to anchor, Dionysus walks you through what he calls the welcoming ritual. It involves no speeches, no robes, no miracles. Just a table set under an olive tree, a flute song or two, and an open jug. Let them come to you, he says. Joy isn't forced, it's invited. You nod. The ship drifts gently into the bay. No grand entrance, just presence. From the trees, villages emerge hesitant, curious, weary. And then it begins. A child approaches first, reaches out wide-eyed to touch a grape still growing on the rail. She plucks one, pops it in her mouth, and smiles. That's all it takes. The others follow, slowly at first, then in waves. They pour onto the beach, some barefoot, others in patched robes or cloaks. They bring nothing. They expect nothing, and yet you give. You offer slices of honeyed bread, cups of wild berry wine, grapes that burst with flavor that somehow matches the listener's mood. One man eats one and promptly bursts into giggles. Another tears. Dionysus sits beneath the olive tree, watching it all unfold with a satisfied nod. Not triumphant, just content, like a gardener who's finally seeing sprouts. Historians still argue whether I was generous, he says. I wasn't. I just hated to see people deny themselves. The night blooms. Torches are lit. Someone finds a harp made of shell and driftwood. Songs begin not rehearsed, not perfect, but real. Children dance. Elders sway. A woman tells a joke so funny, a grapevine curls into a knot from laughing. And you serve and dance and laugh and eat and realize something you hadn't before. This vineyard, this ship, this God, it's not about escape. It's about return to something forgotten, something buried under duty, worry, grief, something wild. Later, as the village sleeps, Dionysus hands you a small cutting of vine, green and soft, its roots wrapped in damp cloth. For them, he says, plant it. Only when you're sure they'll tend it. You nod. He boards the ship. You follow. As the sun rises, the ship sails again quietly without farewell. The villagers will wake, find the tables empty, the torches cold, the sand marked with footprints and laughter, and the cutting waiting. You look back once, just once, and smile. The sea is glass today. No waves, no wind, just stillness. The ship glides as if pushed by thought alone. Even the vines are quiet, their leaves heavy with dew, as if they too are holding their breath. You sit on a stool near the stern, shelling walnuts into a wooden bowl. A satyr watches you, deeply invested, despite not knowing what walnuts are. Dionysus, meanwhile, reclines in a hammock strung between two thick beams of grape-laced wood. He's humming something low and wordless, eyes half closed, one foot trailing lazily through the air. It's almost time, he murmurs. For what? He smiles without opening his eyes. For the ship to rest. You pause. Like a stop, more like a turning, he says. Everything blooms, then bends. Even this. You don't quite understand, but your chest tightens anyway. He gestures for you to follow. You do. He leads you to the very heart of the ship, a place you somehow hadn't noticed before. Not hidden, just quiet. A circle of planks worn smooth by bare feet and dancing. Above it vines form an archway thick with grapes, so dark they're almost black, glistening with golden dust. In the center is a barrel, just one, old, carved, wrapped in ivy. This, Dionysus says, is the first barrel. You blink. The first? He nods. From the first vineyard. Before even that, he says. This one remembers everything, every joy, every tear spilled beside a fig tree, every song half sung by someone too shy to finish. You step closer. You can feel it, not just magic but memory. The wood pulses faintly, not with life but with lives. You ask him what's inside. He smiles sadly. Only what you're ready for. You hesitate. But then you reach out. You press your hand to the side. Images flood you. Not visions, feelings. You're a woman weeping with laughter during a harvest. You're a child hiding under a grape trellis, giggling as juice runs down your arms. You're a satyr dancing alone under moonlight, spinning until your hooves lose track of the earth. You're Dionysus offering a goblet to someone who can't stop crying and then watching them smile through the tears. You pull back breathless. He nods. Joy, he says, isn't about forgetting pain. It's what grows when you carry it gently. You sit beside the barrel, quiet now. The ship continues smooth and unhurried. Dionysus tells you one last tale softly, like he's afraid of waking the ship. Once long ago, a philosopher stowed away in a barrel of wine. He wanted to observe the god as he wrote in a very dry scroll. He lasted one day. By nightfall, he'd thrown away his notes, traded his scrolls for a reed flute, and asked the vine to marry him. She said yes, Dionysus adds with a grin. Historians, he says, still argue whether the philosopher ever existed. But the vine remembers. You both laugh. And then, for the first time since you boarded, Dionysus grows serious. You've helped me tend the ship, he says. You've danced, served, wept, and listened. You've learned the rhythm. He places a hand on your shoulder. So now it's time you took the helm. You stare. I thought it didn't have one. It doesn't need one, he replies. It needs a heart. And you realize he's not leaving. He's becoming. The vines wrap gently around him, not binding but merging. His body dissolves into leaves and grapes, his laughter echoing through the beams. His goblet becomes wood. His robe becomes blossom. His stories become yours. The ship slows, not in sorrow, in purpose. The satyrs bow their heads. The dolphins leap once, then dive, disappearing beneath a sea that now belongs to you. You sit at the center of the deck. The vines curl softly around your arms. The ship leans into your breath. It's yours now. And the grapes, still growing, night again. But this one is different. The stars seem closer, sharper, as though they've been leaning in all along, waiting for this quiet. The sea is black velvet beneath the ship, soft, endless, unknowable. The moon rests low, enormous, suspended like a single drop of milk in a goblet of ink. You're at the helm, though no hands steer it. You don't need to. The ship moves with you now, or perhaps as you. It drifts not toward a place, but through a mood, a memory, a deep hum in the soul that no map could name. The vines bloom in silence tonight. No wild spiral dances, no drunken acrobatics from satyrs. Just the slow unfurling of leaves, the settling of tendrils against beams worn smooth with joy. Even the satyrs have gone quiet. They sit in little knots, whispering stories, polishing cups that don't need polishing. One weaves a garland of grape stems. Another hums an old festival song under his breath, slow and low. You walk the deck and every board feels like it remembers you now. not just as a guest, but as something more, a keeper, a companion, a gardener of stories. You find the barrel again, the first one wrapped in ivy like a cradle. You place your palm against it. It's warm, not with fire, with presence. You close your eyes. You see Dionysus again, not as a god, but as a rhythm, a feeling. The thrum in your chest when music hits just right. The sharp sweetness of a grape burst between your teeth. The ache of laughing too hard. The peace of sitting with someone who needs nothing from you but your being. The ship creaks. You listen, and then you speak. You tell it a story. One of your own. A small one. A memory. Perhaps of a cup passed to you when you were sad. Or the first time you dared to dance alone. Or how a certain scent, rosemary and rain, can still bring tears for reasons you can't explain. The vines lean in, the ship listens, the sea sighs, and just like that you understand. This isn't just a floating vineyard. It's a place for all the things the world forgets to hold. Laughter that doesn't need an audience, tears without shame, songs with no chorus, and people who come with nothing and leave with themselves. You stand at the prow now, watching the sea unfold like a blanket. There is no destination, no temple at the end, no prize for reaching the shore, only motion, only tending. Joy, after all, is not a flame. It's a garden, and gardens must be cared for. Below deck, the satyrs sleep. One snores in a barrel of raisins. A dolphin surfaces once, circles the ship, and vanishes with a flick of its tail. The vines begin to dim, not wither, just rest. You sit beside the helm and exhale, a long, slow breath, and then without ceremony you feel it, the ship itself beginning to dream. Its dreams are long, winding, full of wine and laughter and figs and sorrow and songs sung by people who thought they'd forgotten how. You lean back, eyes half closed. The ship rocks gently, and somewhere in the deep recess of wood and myth and memory a heartbeat answers. You are not alone. You never were. And now, dear friend, the vines quiet, the grapes rest. The deck no longer sways, but simply floats, carried gently by the pulse of a sea that hums in slow time. The stars overhead blink softer now, their edges dulled by sleep. You can still hear the echo of laughter somewhere in the rigging, like a memory too light to land. The ship drifts onward, always onward. But you are safe here. This story, like all good stories, doesn't end. It fades, like candlelight, like the warmth in your chest when the right song finds you at the right time. The floating vineyard will keep sailing, tending, listening, planting joy where it's needed most. And when you dream tonight, you might find yourself back on the deckhands, sticky with grape juice hair, full of fig leaves, heart light again. Or maybe you'll just sleep gently and deeply, knowing that somewhere out there joy floats patiently, waiting for its next guest, its next dancer, its next gardener. So tuck your blanket close. Let the hum of the ship rock you. Let your breath slow with the waves. You've earned your rest. The vines will keep watch. The grapes will grow. And Dionysus, he's in every giggle, every blush, every soft moment of kindness you offer yourself in the quiet. Sweet dreams.